Hello and welcome back to the No Ratings podcast. It's that time. It's the insight, but it's going to be a slightly longer one than usual because we're going to be talking about Tommy T. Pythagoras with me as usual. You're honestly, I have to just very quickly say, you're always in like a zip up or a shirt, and I've only just realised I don't think I've ever seen you in a t-shirt to this day.
It's because I go shopping once a year, and it's like I just buy all my items in bulk, and then I don't go shopping again. And for me, obviously being a lawyer, it's like zip ups are just it's easy to just wear to the office and not have to wear a suit and tie.
I got you.
I mean, I do want to look like Harvey Specter now and again, but
I was going to
I'm
say you got
not.
the Gareth
It's
Southgate
not
wardrobe.
trendy anymore to wear a suit and tie to the
I got
office.
you. Yeah, I was going to say you got Gareth Southgate suitcase, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Tommy T. Let's. I think we just jump straight into it. Obviously, we've just seen a couple of games under him. I think the first talking point that everyone's talking about, we've mentioned it a lot as well, is what is Foden's role going to be in this squad? There's a lot of people saying he shouldn't even be in the squad. Where are you with Phil Foden for England?
I think when I saw him out on the right, he looks so glidey with the ball, like the way he touches the ball when he's dribbling. You're like, bloody hell, you could potentially do something, but then he
Mm,
never actually goes and does something with the ball, and that's the frustrating thing because even as a winger, there's so much bloody potential there. But unless you're psychologically gonna break free of this hold that I think Pep's had over him in terms of his development, he looks so afraid to lose the ball. He looks so afraid to actually do a bit of footwork, do a bit of magic. Everything's just like dribble, dribble, dribble. But it's like the guy's still sticking with him. Then he cuts back, then he plays it back, and it's just like constant recycling. He's become a very robotic player. And I think for Foden, forget about the position. It's about how does he psychologically break out of this current type of player he is and really gets in touch with his flary side, because I'm sick and tired of seeing these warm-ups where you see, oh, look at Phil Foden's silky first touch, how he's keeping the ball up in the air. Show me that flair in the actual bloody game. Show me that flair, because it doesn't matter where you are on the pitch, a boy of that talent shouldn't be playing like a robot like he is at this moment.
I think there's been a few videos that gone viral. Obviously, there was a Fabregas video, if you remember, from Qatar, I want to say. And then recently there was a video of Roy Keane and Ian Wright discussing this. And then what you said almost echoes what they said as well. But the question that I think a lot of people have is like, okay, he's so talented. Everyone says that. Even you said like when he glides with the ball, and when you watch him, he gets you off your seat. Not immediately, I think I think he's lost that fear factor a little bit. Maybe he's a little bit down on confidence. I don't know. But when I really look at Phil Foden's career, I also kind of go like, if it's not Phil Foden, you're probably going, he had like one really top patch. And apart from that, he's kind of always been patchy. So I feel like maybe the expectation on him is too much. Um,
To a degree, yes, Nubaid, because in terms of his
mm,
actual career, it's been disappointing. But obviously, from a coaching perspective, I'm looking at him. I'm like, the ball sticks to him like glue. The way he plays with his head up, the way he is in tight areas. There's so much more he
mm,
could do. And obviously, I've watched him for under 17s England when he first broke through, and he looked like a bit of a magician type player. He looked like could be like one of our Gaza type players. I think playing under Pep Guardiola's management has completely ruined him as a
really?
player. And I personally think it's too the damage is done. I can't really see how he breaks out of that mentality as a player. I think you get to a certain age where you start playing in certain patterns and that becomes your game, and it's very, very difficult to break out of that. And because England play in such a boring way, and he's still under Man City and Pep Guardiola, like how is he actually going to break out of that way of playing? I don't really see how it's going to happen.
Yeah, I also have a similar sort of worry because I think the feeling was that De Bruyne would go and he would come in, and obviously he had that period where he won Player of the Year, Young Player of the Year, sorry. Um, I think now is sort of the time has arrived where I'm watching him, especially for England. This is England related conversation, so we should stay there. And I go, you said not about positions, but I almost go like, can he play off the right? I'd rather have Saka. Can he play through the middle where Jude is playing? We tried it, didn't work. And Jude, in my opinion, who we're going to talk about, is England's most impactful player. He can do anything on the pitch. Can he play off the left? I don't think he's ever looked comfortable off the left. So then what do you do?
My position for Foden has always been false nine. So if I was to play him in any position, I'd want him at false nine, because then if you want to just do your simple sort of, simple layoffs, simple passes, but then get into the box with speed, then I think that would be more actually
Mm,
aligned to his natural game as
mm,
it is even under a Pep. So I think that is a way I could see him playing for England because he'd still basically do what Kane's doing, which is ghost for most of the game, and they just turn up for a tap in, like feed into the deeper areas, and then like
yeah.
I reckon Jude Bellingham would actually like having Foden there with him because it would take the burden off him a little bit, and then you'd have like two tens almost at times, and the midfield could just bump the ball into these type of players. So that's the sort of position I wouldn't mind him playing in. I'm not saying as a starter, but I'm just saying as a tactical option. The second thing is I think backup to a Jude possibly, and then a backup to a Saka. He needs to be a backup player outside of this false nine solution that I've proposed.
Yeah, I've it's strange because it's like you're not allowed to say that Foden has to be a backup player. Like either he's like starting in one position or another. But I think we have now arrived at this point where I think it is just a case of look at form over a period of years and look at this team. Like Saka's a specialist right-sided winger. Jude Bellingham's a specialist. I wouldn't even call him a number 10. He's just a midfielder that can do everything. That's what actually let's talk about Jude Bellingham because I think that's the one key change. We started talking before we recorded, and the reality is obviously it's difficult to change things in international football. Neither of us really see an enormous change in Tuchel's style, but Jude Bellingham is the change. And I think we did an insight during one of England's games under Southgate, and we both were sort of saying, like, build it around him. He's the answer.
I really enjoyed Jude's performances past two games. He's looked better under Tuchel in two games than he's done under Ancelotti all season this season, in my opinion. I think what Tuchel's brought the best out of him in these past two games is he's kind of encouraged him to be like an attacking playmaker, run the final third, link up play well, drift into pockets, and just almost express himself and be a baller. Like watching
Mm.
Jude was like it was like OG Jude. Like it was just fun to watch him. He was actually one of the most interesting players to watch in these two games. So long may it continue because yeah, I loved his performances past two
I
games.
think the one thing about Jude that is probably where people sort of misunderstand him a little bit, I think anyway, is that people go like he's a box to box midfielder. He's a some people go like he can play anywhere in midfield. My theory is kind of what Tuchel's already done is he's gone. Kane's fantastic, and obviously he said he'd build the team around Kane, but I wonder what that looks like when tournament time comes around. But then Jude is sort of your, in my opinion, your answer to all your problems. Like you had a problem with Foden, as we just mentioned. You no longer have that problem because Jude's there. Saka can play off the right hand side exactly how he wants to because of how Jude plays. I think slightly deeper to Jude is where we might have a slight problem. Like who plays next to Jude? Because I think you have to platform Jude to make him special. Because I think otherwise he will go and go. I'll go receive the ball from the centre backs because I can do that. I'll then charge. Like I think you need to give him support.
Yeah, you need to discipline Jude to stick to being that final third playmaker, goal getter, match winner, because Jude can do those things. What Jude cannot do is pick up the ball of the centre backs. He's not a number six. He's not a Regista who's going to be hitting 100 passes per game like a Pedri for Barcelona. He's not that type of player. Jude is what I call like a roided Frank Lampard, Gerrard style player, where he's like those players, but he's also very silky, relatively speaking to them, powerful as well. So yeah, platform him. So you got to get your six right, you got to get your eight right, and he's got to just focus on feeding the forward, linking up with the wingers. That needs to be Jude's job.
Who, while we're at this point, who are the two that you play behind? Because Declan Rice has had a lot of stick recently.
So Declan Rice for me has to be in the team just because I think off the ball he's probably our best defensive midfielder, and I would pair him with say a Mainu or a Adam Wharton profile of midfielder. Um, I mean, Morgan Rogers today, I think he did well, but I see Morgan Rogers as someone who is a transitional player rather than a game controller type of profile of midfielder. So
Mm,
he's almost like a backup to Jude or an alternative to Jude. Is the type of player I see Rogers as. I don't really see Rogers as a central midfielder. I think that would get caught out against the big sides.
yeah. I think you've also mentioned Curtis Jones, which
Oh
I
yes, yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, go on. I find this one interesting.
Yeah, so Curtis Jones is a player who I think gets overrated to a degree. because I put out a positive Curtis Jones tweet regarding his inclusion for England, but it kind of got misinterpreted as, well, this is why we've always rated Curtis Jones. But that wasn't what I was trying to say. I was trying to say England don't have many midfield profiles like a Curtis Jones over the past 10 years. Someone who's just very silky on the ball, very press resistant, links up all the dots. And that's the type of player, if you throw into a big game for England, you
Mm,
need players like that that can just hold on to the ball. It's not about whether Curtis Jones is Pedri or whether he's Vitinha. Forget about that. It's just about what does he actually bring to a football match. And the worst version of Curtis Jones will still be pretty silky and agile on the ball. And in these tight games where you need players who are very confident and comfortable on the ball, he will give you that. And England don't produce that type of midfielder often. So that's why I'm hoping under Tuchel, the likes of Jones, hopefully long term Wharton, Mainu. These are the type of midfield profiles we're going to need for England to, like you
mm.
said, platform Jude and platform Rice as well, because those two are quite big sort of physical monster type players. They need that silky player in between them to kind of link it all together.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think in previous years, even England's like golden period, part of the issue England have always had is that there's too many not top end players, but these players that managers can't decide who they should build a team around. Like, and I think Tuchel will come in under the same issue at some point, where it's Kane and Jude up top, and I don't really love that combination. I don't know how you feel about that combination, but I just don't think it
It's too slow for me. Like I want to see Liam Delap
really.
in there. I want to see, yeah, I want to see like a powerhouse, fast, hungry striker who's like, for example, I can just imagine England if they're in a big game and it's like in transition, they've nicked the ball, Jude's driving, and I just want him Trevella outside of the foot, play someone in, and someone's running onto the ball and putting the finish away. Now, Ollie Watkins is a player who um, has grown in my estimation. To be fair, I don't think he's the right answer, but I do think we need someone like a roided Watkins, someone who's got his pace and athleticism, but superior link up play, superior hold up play. I think that's what this England team is missing to take it to the next level. Because when I look at a team like France, the reason why even under a like not the greatest coach ever in Deschamps, the reason why they get away with it is there's always a degree of spark in that team that will still hurt any team that they can come up against. I don't think England have enough of a spark in that front line sometimes.
I also, just while we're here, before we move into the discussion about left backs, I also do worry a little bit. Now you mentioned pace, I didn't even really think of it. They don't have a lot of pace going forward. Like Saka's quick. I wouldn't really say Saka's electric. Like if we're thinking about France, for example, you've got Dembele, you've got Mbappe, you've got Doué, who's maybe not electric in like sprints, but electric in possession. Saka's like very efficient and outstanding at that. Then on the left side, Rashford. Um,
I mean, Rashford was having to work so hard today, but watching him today it just made me realize like he's not really gonna do the long term business to the
mm,
level of winning us a World Cup. He's just not. Like there's limitations there, and I also think he's
yeah.
lost about 5% of pace a little bit. Like, he used to be so electric. Like, you can say whatever you want about Rashford, but he was one of the most electrifying players in the Premier League, but also in Europe. There's this little spark that's just missing. His footwork is still kind of there. I wouldn't say it's as precise. Maybe there's a slight lack of confidence there. I don't know. But him and Liao have both lost about 10% of some physicality aspect because Liao looked so labored yesterday, and Rashford gave me a similar vibe today. You compare them to say an Usman Dembele now
Yeah.
or a Yamal. There's a temp or even a Gakpo. Like Gakpo looks very electric at the moment, but these two players have seemed to have lost a bit of electricity.
I also just worry about and I saw your tweet, which inspired the thought really, because I didn't really think about it to be fair. But I do worry about this constant desire of having fullbacks that come inside, meaning wingers are just effectively isolated. And then I think you end up in this situation where if your winger's not Lamine Yamal, who can get isolated 100 times in a game and still take his fullback on, um, I think, and this is a Tuchel issue as well. To be fair, Tuchel had this issue at Chelsea where it did start to feel like they started to play really narrow football. This towards the end of his Chelsea period, and people started to say like you need more invention in wide areas, and that is my slight concern with this England team because I also go like there's Saka who's your standout winger, and then everyone else is nowhere near the level. And then you're also lacking physicality, like we've mentioned. You're also lacking pace, and then now you're asking wingers to do things that are just not easy to do, I don't think.
England's 3-4-3 shape today was so narrow and lacking in width. You touched upon Tuchel at Chelsea. His original system at Chelsea
Mm,
worked because Reece James and Ben Chilwell were in the prime of their careers, fantastic going forward as wing backs, really creative wing backs, really attacking wing backs. And this was the same era you had Robbo and Trent also flying forward,
yeah.
and even Pep at that time had like guys like Cancelo, or whatever. So at that era of the Premier League, it was really good. Like everyone was flying forward. There was actual width in the game. My God, like I feel like football's gone backwards tactically. Like it's horrific watching these fullbacks just invert for no, I'm going to end up swearing, but for no goddamn good reason, right? Now, like once Reece James started to get injured, Ben Chilwell started to get injured, Tuchel ran out of ideas because no other wing back he could bring into the team was going to be of the same level because them two were like the flank of the team. So once they were out of the picture, Tuchel didn't really know what to do. Now, in this two games that we've seen, I love Skelly. I think that's a good introduction to bring into the team, but I'm not utterly convinced by Skelly staying as an inverted fullback the whole game. What I would have liked to have seen was perhaps start first 15 minutes, do it just to suck in the opposition to become narrow, and then start to make his runs go outside of Rashford to catch them by surprise. But at no stage during the game did we see any outward run of Rashford. And then on the other flank, Reece James was
Mm,
inverting as well. So you had both the fullbacks in and you had Bowen isolated. And Bowen looked very laboured because he's like up against two players every single time. And usually Bowen can, even in that situation, he does all right. But he wasn't physically sharp today. So then that became a really uphill struggle for him. So we're making things very, very hard for our wingers at the moment. And this is a common problem across football, to be truth be told. So it's not just a Tuchel problem.
So can I just quickly counter that, just as a thought? Do you think in Tuchel's situation and maybe other situations as well, just, I can't think off the top of my head, but because a winger is a dying art now, most wide players are inside forwards, especially if you think about this England squad, there isn't actually an out and out winger off the top of my head. Do you think in that regard he's going, well, my strength is in the middle of my pitch, so I'm going to play everything through the middle?
It's wrong because we were taught as coaches when I was coming through, like you've got your five principles: penetration, width. Like there's timeless principles that apply regardless of what era of football you're in. Even Pep Guardiola knows that at some stage that I've effed this up. This is too narrow, and then he's brought in guys like Savinho back in. He started to bring guys in like Doku back in. Even Arsenal, when they're playing at their best, it's usually because Saka's in the team and Martinelli's in the team. So it doesn't matter what sort of philosopher you think you are, there's certain timeless principles that you can't disobey. And in football, width is still the king. Like you can't get away from width. So these managers that seem to have picked, oh, this is the new sort of fad, inverted fullbacks, they're completely misunderstanding the basic principles of football because the more narrow you are and you're letting the opposition be
Mm.
narrow, then there's no space to work with. So it's common sense. It's like when you play chess, chess is still going to be chess, isn't it? The aim of the objective is to kill the king and hopefully get the queen on the way to make your job easier. There's certain principles that will stay the same. So with football, it's all about the more I can stretch the opposition, the more space I've got to work with, the more I'm going to be able to get shots off. You restrict that space, there's no you're restricting your chance to get shots off. So this is, for me, it's just very stupid tactical management, to be honest.
I think we've spoken about it quite a few times on the insight about the development of the game becoming this way inclined. I do just think with this England team, and because we've mentioned it, if I think about wide players, they don't like there isn't a naturally left footed winger. I don't think, unless my brain's going mad. Um, and then at left back, you've got Miles Lewis Skelly, and
I mean, Lewis Hall could be an option, I guess,
yeah, and he's
down the
definitely
overlap.
more of a traditional fullback. He doesn't like inverting too often, and he's not that comfortable on the inside. So he might give you the width, which might make someone like Rashford's life easier, for example. But generally speaking, there just isn't a winger like I can't think of someone that I'd put out there and go on any given day he'll spin his fullback and win you a game.
But even then, though, like the reason why I said it's the winger's job is so hard now, and then that makes us think maybe there isn't any good
Mm,
wingers. Because if you put David Beckham into today's game, like today's game against Latvia, and you made him play right wing in that formation, he would have
yeah,
lasted 5 minutes. Now, I'm one of the biggest fans of David Beckham ever, right? I think he's absolutely world class player, but that setup would have been horrific for him. Like he wouldn't have been able to create any chances because imagine him going
yeah,
one against two players with no Gary Neville on the overlap, for example. He would have struggled. Even Ryan Giggs would have probably been okay because he would have gone down the line a little bit. But Robin would have struggled today. Ribéry would have struggled today because they had guys like Philip Lahm and Alaba overlapping them. So we've got to give these guys a bit of a chance here, like, and we're not. We're making things incredibly hard for them.
true. Well, I think that's everything. We've touched on all the key points, I think, and because we've only seen two games, it's harsh. It's hard and harsh to pick certain things up, but there are certain trends, like we mentioned, Jude Bellingham as a key one, Miles Lewis Skelly, Foden's role. But we will do more England content as the time gets closer to tournament football and there's more games. But we'll be back doing league football or European football from the end of this week, I think, or the start of the next one. But for now, me and Pyfag are gonna love you and leave you because I say this every time, but we're two dads. We've got a big life to live outside of this. But if you enjoyed this, then make sure you support the channel, follow Pyfag, and we'll see you in the next one.